This program is about how restaurants get made. And surprisingly, most of the elements that make our restaurants have been around for over 200 years. Street floor access, receptionists,
follow me on in, please. Thank you.
side-by-side tables, wait staff, kitchens in the back, and a written invoice. Almost everything that makes up the modern restaurant was developed in Paris during a 55-year period between 1765 and 1820. All this stuff is over 200 years old. For centuries, there had been inns and taverns along the road where you could stop in and get something to eat or drink. And in Paris, there was something called the table d'hôte, which means the host table. Big room, giant communal table. Everybody ate the same food, drank the same wine, and paid the same bill. But you never knew who you were going to sit next to. It could be somebody quite charming or somebody who was quite revolting. And I mean revolting not just in the sense that they want to kill the king, and women were not allowed. There were some people who wanted to eat out, but in a more controlled environment. And they began saying that eating in a table d'hôte was unhealthy, and that if you wanted to have a good and safe meal, you should eat in something you called a restaurant. The word restaurant was used to describe a broth made with chicken or beef and served in a clean and hygienic environment. Eventually, the shops where the soup was being served took the name of the soup and became known as a restaurant. Shortly after the French Revolution of 1789, in an area of Paris known as the Palais Royal, a group of restaurants opened and offered a bigger selection of foods. You could eat at your own table with your own pals. The restaurant was evolving from a place associated with good health to a place associated with good times, and women were always welcome. Within 20 years, Paris was packed with restaurants that were almost precisely what we see today. And these days, we see them throughout the world. You see them in Hong Kong. You see them in Japan. You see them in Italy. And you see them in Chicago, where we are today. And in terms of making a living, this is not an easy business.
I have to tell you, a restaurant is a very tricky investment. More than half of them go under within the first 6 months. If I were your accountant, I'd have to strongly advise you against it.
You would, huh? Yeah. Well, you're not my accountant.
No, I mean, if I were your accountant...
I told you. I took you out here...
No, I'm just saying that it's a very, very tricky business. And...
This program is about how a restaurant is developed from the original idea to opening night. The foods, the drinks, the interior design, the training of the staff, all of it. But it's also about how restaurants change from generation to generation within the same family. Starting in the early 1980s, I began reporting for a major television news network. Now, these were the good old days before fake news. You were forced to go out and actually report about something that was happening. One of my first reports was about a guy named Rich Melman. Rich had spent about 10 years building a restaurant company in Chicago called Let Us Entertain You. That's Lettuce, and Rich was the head lettuce. His first restaurant opened in 1971. It was a hip burger joint geared to young singles with rock music and good food. It was designed to appeal to various tastes by offering vegetarian and microbiotic foods alongside hamburgers, overstuffed sandwiches, milkshakes, and Chicago's first salad bar. It was called R.J. Grunt's and became one of the hottest restaurants in Chicago. Since then, Rich and his Let Us Entertain You partners have opened almost 300 restaurants representing over 70 different concepts. These days, Rich points out that he doesn't always have a good sense of what the younger customer wants, but he's lucky to have 3 children and a wife who are kind enough to let him know what's going on now.
Interview with Melmans, take 1.
Love it.
That was great.
Listen,
Nailed it.
Show business.
I sat down with Rich and his sons RJ and Jarrett and his daughter Molly to find out how a restaurant gets started and how things have changed from one generation to the next. RJ is the president of Let Us Entertain You. Jarrett and his sister Molly are partners. As you'd expect, RJ, Jarrett, and Molly have very different personalities, but somehow they pull it all together, and I can't think of a more successful restaurant family in the country.
I think maybe the most important thing is that you have some experience and you have the money. A lot of people jump into it, have maybe one of the two. It's real difficult when you only have one of the two.
When you say experience, what do you mean?
If you came to me and you had never been in the restaurant business and tell me that you want to get into the restaurant business, I'd probably say to you, well, get a job in restaurants and see if you like it.
Like a waiter or a busboy?
Doesn't matter.
Or in the kitchen?
Yeah, any of those things would be good. I think you have to meet restaurant people. You have to meet people that can show you how to do a particular job.
In your generation, same story, different?
Yeah, we meet people all the time that apply for their first job in the business. I think one of the questions we ask is, what makes you think you'll enjoy this? And that's the first step, I think, finding out if you like the business. But there's no substitute, even today, for just going in and trying it.
We have interns every summer, and our biggest thing for them, we say, figure out if you figure out that you love the restaurant business, it's a good summer. If you figure out you don't love the restaurant business, it's a good summer.
It's a business that's a little bit like show business, and it looks sort of maybe more glamorous from the outside than it is on the inside. And so I think experience will tell you if it really is for you. It's sort of a different rhythm. It's a different schedule than a lot of other jobs. So yeah, experience really is crucial. The restaurant business, unlike creating a tech company or creating a lot of things that are starting now, is that it requires a lot of capital to build it. You have to build the restaurant, and you don't even know if it's going to work after it's built. So there's a tremendous amount that goes into it. So without knowing the pitfalls of what could happen in building a restaurant, it'd be really difficult.
You know, there are thousands of questions, simple little things that come up in terms of a day-to-day running of a restaurant or building of a restaurant. When you have no experience, they become a big burden. You know, simple things that you might know the answer to if you've worked for a couple of years, you just don't know.
I remember when I was building this restaurant, I thought I had some sense of what a restaurant was because I've been a restaurant reviewer for 15 years. And I thought, well, I know how this works. And I thought, gee, it's a shame that those people have to work on the line back there and it's so hot. So why don't we air condition the area? And we did, and we never served a hot bowl of soup until we ripped it all out. I meant
But the
well.
staff was happy.
I definitely meant well.
I loved it.
Molly made a key point. The happiness of the staff is essential. Day after day, it's the kitchen staff that prepares the food. They check the ingredients as they arrive. They get everything ready to cook, and they do the cooking. A year ago, I learned that people who wash the dishes and the pots are critical. Without them, the place closes down. And it's the wait staff that comes in contact with the customers. The overall happiness of the staff is essential to the making of a successful restaurant. After you've got the general idea, you start working on the food.
100%. If I'm not excited about the food, I can't do the restaurant. It's as simple as that. I want to get goosebumps when I try something. I want to know what we're going to be famous for before we ever open that door.
Gnocchi?
With scallop, with truffle, cream sauce.
Gnocchi with scallop. It's great.
They have a test kitchen where they work through the recipes that are going to go on the menu.
Take it back and jump in.
I'm in.
On the side. Yeah, like that. Yeah. The idea isn't how many items we could make, it's how many items we could make great. And often we will work on an item and we'll eat 8 things and just one will make the cut. But that one's going to be a good one.
That's excellent.
No, it doesn't go. Ricky, what do you got?
The day we were there, they were working on a recipe for Dutch baby. A Dutch baby is basically a pancake batter that is poured into a saute pan and baked in the oven for about 20 minutes. It should come out light and fluffy and crispy, but that wasn't happening. It was too soft. To make the finished dish more interesting, they had added blueberries to the batter. But during the baking, the blueberries were giving off liquid, which was preventing the pancake from getting crispy. Once the problem was spotted and the blueberries taken out of the batter, everything worked fine. So they started working on an interesting way to serve the blueberries on the side. And this was all baking.
Yes.
Try it with the last minute under a broiler, half minute.
Oh, interesting.
Because
okay.
what it does is it crisps this edge
Sure.
and it dries this out a little bit.
Okay.
I only know this from all of the ones I screwed up.
I thought, no. Okay. Sure.
Kevin Brown has been responsible for the development of over 100 of the Let Us Entertain You restaurants throughout the United States.
That's a priority. You've got your priorities in mind, and I appreciate
He
it.
clearly has the right management skills to make a successful restaurant. So here's some of the stuff you need to know. As it is with almost every business, you need a pro forma.
A pro forma is a business plan, and everybody gets very focused, rightfully so, on the food and the service, but putting together a good business plan, which talks about, okay, how many square feet do I have? And then how many seats can I get in that square feet? How many four tops? How many deuces? How big's the bar going to be? How much bar do I want? Then you start to look at your sales mix. Well, do I want to serve a lot of alcohol? Am I going to have a big wine list? All this has a bearing on cost, has a bearing on storage. And then from there, you understand how many seats am I going to have in the restaurant? And it all, again, you started with your menu. And your menu determines how much labor you're going to need in the kitchen. And then the menu and the dining room layout determines how much front of the house labor you're going to need. So there you can start figuring out your check average, you can start figuring out your turnover, how often is that going to turn over. And then doing the menu and doing your check average, then you know what kind of food costs and liquor costs and wine costs you're going to have based on profitability. I always look at it as we fly in parallel lines when we're creating a restaurant. There's always this excitement and tension and fun about the test kitchen rolling, but in parallel lines, we're working on website design, graphic design, financial implications, staffing, training, education. You know, we talked about the fantasy and the reality of our business. The dreams and the fantasy before you open the restaurant about, I'm going to serve great food, it's really going to be an exciting environment, I'm going to meet a lot of cool people, I'm going to really entertain my friends well. The reality is you're running a business, you have to please a lot of people. You would be surprised how seldom a person comes back to a restaurant. You have to constantly be attracting new guests. There is so much business to run when the restaurant's not running that I think people underestimate the amount of hours and time it takes to run payroll, order food, keep the sanitation standards up, making sure all your licensing, all your financials are keeping up. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of people to help you, and that costs money. So the fantasy of everybody walking around a dining room and saying this is the greatest thing in the world, that can exist. But then there is the next day where you actually have to run the business to make sure you can continue to do that for Saturdays to come.
And it's also essential to be consistent.
Definitely has to be consistent. You have to do that day in and day out. You know, people sometimes think that when they open the restaurant, okay, I've done it. What you have to realize in this business is you have to continue to improve your business every day. I mean, you really have to start thinking, what can I do to make this place better? Restaurants don't get tired, the owners do. And I think you just have to make sure you keep that in mind. You just need to keep driving the business.
Every day you have to come into the restaurant and ask yourself, what can I do to make our restaurant better? It's the key to success.
We just broke down every item. I think the tomatoes come from a farm that's about 90 miles west of here. We're actually going to visit tomorrow.
Every day we worked on this program, I would see RJ come in and ask Jared, what can we do to make our lettuce sharper, juicier, more fun to eat? Then Jared would ask Molly, and Molly would consult with Rich.
Good. You like the patties and the texture and stuff like that? Yeah, way better.
Constant ongoing improvement is an essential part of building and maintaining a successful restaurant. If you're watching this program and you're thinking about opening a restaurant, face the truth.
Hot checks on one. Collision mats on one.
Every customer is saying, okay, you want to entertain me? Go for it. Movies are easy, restaurants are hard. So now you have your idea and a plan for the food. Next, you need to figure out how you are going to structure the space.
It starts with the layout, I think. You spend a ton of time trying to get the floor plan right.
How do you know how many bars you're going to need?
I think you work backwards a lot of time. This was a great lesson that you taught us when we opened our first place. We sort of had a goal in mind for sales and for the amount of liquor that we would sell. And you pointed out that we didn't have enough bars, and you sort of said, okay, what can a bartender ring in a night? And
how many drinks can they make an hour?
You multiply that out, and you sort of say, okay, we're going to come up short, and we ended up adding another bar.
2 bars. One downstairs.
One up and one down.
So you're working back from the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to sell 2,000 cocktails a night, you got to divide that by how many cocktails a bartender can make an hour. And then you can know how many bartenders you need to make 2,000 cocktails a night.
And how many will fit at a bar.
Yeah, and then now, by the way, now you got to understand, do you have enough storage space for all the glassware? Well, one thing that you have taught us is that 80% of the success of a restaurant happens before you open the door. And we spend a tremendous amount of time planning, even whether it's 2.5 years out or 6 months out from idea to when it happens, that so much goes into it. I think that understanding the size of the box that you need to have for the restaurant to make it work is the most important thing. If you said we're going to do a quick service restaurant, well, why would you need 5,000 square feet? You need 2,000 feet. You need to understand. And we like, I think, locations to be a little bit undersized, actually, than oversized.
Reduces the stress.
For sure.
Well, it's better to be a little bit too small than a little bit too big in terms of a restaurant. Just filling it, having energy, having people in the building. We like friction. We want it to feel good.
And between the two Melman generations, the outlook of the customer has changed.
The guests who come in the restaurant today have more ownership and say about what we do. 20, 30 years ago, people would come in and have a nice dinner and they'd give their comments to it. But it wasn't, we react to the guests now. The guests they want to have comment on it. They want to talk about, they want to have more control. If there's anything about the younger generation today, they want controllability and they want shareability. And they want the ability to interact.
Next up is hiring and training the staff.
We talk about the success of a restaurant before we open the doors, and I think it starts with the hiring the right people, but then we spend a lot of time and we dedicate a lot of our attention to training our staff and training our team to know the product. I think the more they know about what they're selling, the more confident they're going to be at their tables, but we teach them a lot of our culture, kind of just instilling that we care about them so that they take care of our guests. We're really focusing now on continuing to develop the teams, offering weekly wine classes and whiskey classes and food tastings. I think the more they're excited about what they're selling, you can see it on the floor.
For us, continuing education has really exploded, I think.
Such an emphasis on learning that if you're here as a busser or a server wanting to learn how to bartend and learn about spirits and take our class.
Max, what do you think the difference between the two is? The fruit set is far different. You would think that the first one, the Verdejo, would be more of a cooler climate.
And there's a whole new different approach to advertising.
There's tweaking the Three Dots menu, doing some design for our ASAP poke.
Advertising today's changed a bit with Yelp and TripAdvisor and all the communication that's out there. Social media is stronger today than advertising. Traditional print advertising is limited in its scale and scope. Right now, the best advertising you can do is what has always been the best advertising in our business is word of mouth. It's just become a lot faster, a lot more electronic, and a lot more widespread.
There's also been a significant change between generations in terms of restaurant background music.
I think prior to us getting into the restaurant business, it really didn't mean much in restaurants. I was affected by Woodstock, and so the music was better than elevator music when we did our first restaurant, but my knowledge and the sound systems and everything else connected with it is gone to different extremes.
The thing about music is that there is a stark difference in quality versus how the better quality it sounds, the more comfortable it is for a guest too. Bad sounding systems you have to talk over, they're muddled. So the more clear it is at a lower volume, actually, the better it is for conversation. So you can have a great sound system and it really makes the guest experience nicer.
It's a terrific business for an entrepreneur to get into. For somebody who wants to own their own business, as difficult as the business is, it's really a very satisfying business. You have the ability to make a great product in a great environment with great employees, and you have the chance to really serve people and please them. And that's really satisfying for me. The idea that we can do our job and do our job well and make people excited or happy or satisfied makes me very satisfied.
So now you have some experience in the restaurant business, an idea for your restaurant, a plan for the food, an indication of what to do about staff, music, and your bar. And most important, some idea of the economics. That's part one of our series on the making of a restaurant. In part two, we're going to look at a few other essential elements in the plan and the details behind a number of successful restaurants. We'll also meet one of the world's most respected wine experts, discover the secret of a very successful tiki bar, and attend a Chicago barbecue that draws 40,000 serious eaters. I hope you'll join us. For Travels and Traditions, I'm Burt Wolf. But wait, there's more. Whenever we edit one of our programs, we always end up with more good material than we can fit in. Interviews, stories, recipes. So we decided to put them on our website, burtwolf.com.